Hello class, this is Dr. Hallaq again, and we're ready for another Photoshop tutorial. This one is really exciting for me because I am a video guy, and that's how I started using Photoshop in the first place, is because Photoshop works really well with video. If any of you have used Adobe Premiere or Apple's Final Cut Pro or maybe Avid, all of those video editing programs can ingest a Photoshop file, and when it does that, all of the layers are still intact or separated so that you can now manipulate each of those individual Photoshop layers within your video editing software. And that's pretty fun and exciting if you're a video person. Well, I'm going to actually show you how to do the opposite of that in Photoshop today. Photoshop now, starting about 5 or 6 years ago, allows you to edit video within the Photoshop software. So that's what we're going to cover today. Let me just dive right in and let's go ahead and get started. This is going to look a little bit unfamiliar, but I think you'll quickly get the hang of it. So as I share my screen today, first of all, you're going to notice I've got all of my files up, and these are our folders that are available for our exercise. You'll see I have a few extra folders in here, but you will notice when you open up Canvas that I only have the zip folders. So I have a Prairie Fire video zip folder, and I have a Hungry Heartland video zip folder. Those are the only two. I don't have these individual folders with individual files in them because video files are really, really big. What I've done for you is I have compressed these video files for your use so they're a little bit smaller than normal. But if you were to look at an individual full quality 4K video clip, you'll see that its size is approximately 1 gigabyte per minute of video. Imagine that, 1 gigabyte per minute of video in full resolution 4K video. That is huge, especially for those of you that are used to working with photographs and so forth. You get some photos that are pretty high resolution. You think they're pretty good size, but video files really blow those out of the water. And so I have zipped these files, you'll notice, and I have compressed each of these video clips so they are relatively small in terms of how long video is. This one clip that I've highlighted here, you'll notice as we go down to look at the information, it is in standard definition. It is 9 seconds long, and its size is 4.5 megs. So it's compressed quite a bit, and that's just to allow for your ease in using these types of files. Some of these files were really, really big, full resolution, 4K raw, and would have been really difficult to manage within Photoshop, and especially for someone who is not used to using video files. And I know some of you have worked with video files, so some of the things that we will cover today might be a little bit elementary. But let's go ahead and jump in here and open up a new file. So I'm going to select File, New, and when I do that, I'm going to go right over to the top here, to the far right, where it says Film and Video. And in this window, you're going to notice we have several different file types. We have HD 1080p, and if we were doing full resolution broadcast quality video, that's probably what we would select. We also have 720p. It's a little bit lower resolution, not as many pixels, but still considered high definition video. And then we have HD 1080p in a little bit different aspect ratio, 1440 by 1080p. You notice that's a little different than our first one, which is 1920 by 1080. That is the standard window size for video. This HDV one fits more of a film style profile. And then down below here, we also have some templates that you can use. If we have some time towards the end, I might show you a little bit about how those are laid out. But for right now, let's choose the HDV or HDTV 720p video. And you will notice, first of all, here's the number of pixels, 1280 by 720. That's exactly what it tells us right down here. And it gives us our orientation, and it tells us what resolution that we have. And remember from the beginning of class, video files only have a 72 pixels per inch resolution. So it's not going to do us any good whatsoever to increase that. So let's just leave that at 72. Because we are dealing with video, it's going to show up on a screen of some sort. We want to use RGB color as opposed to CMYK color. So let's just leave that right there. 8-bit is good. Our background is fine. It's not going to really matter for us. And let's go ahead and hit create. Now there is our video in a television screen aspect ratio. And I will tell you right now that when you're working with video in Photoshop, most of the time you're going to have a different use in mind. In fact, when working with video, just like with your images, you should always have the end use in mind and know where it's going to be seen and by what kind of an audience. So you'll notice that I have a couple other images open up here. Untitled number 1. This is still that same aspect ratio. We have 16 by 9 right here. That means 16 units wide by 9 units tall. Whatever those units are. In a television screen, those units could potentially be inches. So 16 inches wide by 9 inches tall. It could even be feet. 16 feet wide by 9 feet tall. Doesn't really matter what your unit of measurement is. It just needs to be consistent. And for a screen, we always use that 16 by 9 ratio. Well, this first image that I have is actually flipped on its side, and it, instead of 16 by 9, is 9 by 16. Why would we use this? We would use this type of video for something that we would expect a person would be watching on their cell phone. Most of the time today, people don't take the time to turn that cell phone on its side, and they just simply watch it holding it in their hand vertically. So if we suspect that our viewers are going to do that, then that's what we want to do with our video. We'll just turn it on its side, and then we'll crop all of our video clips to fit within that aspect ratio. The other aspect ratio that I have here is actually a square. In this case, it's only 3 inches by 3 inches. This is something that we might expect to see on social media. If you're posting on Instagram or Twitter or even Facebook, yeah, some people still post video to Facebook. If you're doing that, more often than not, we see video in a square frame. And so we can go ahead and do that. I'm going to be using this 16 by 9 wide frame because that is how most video is shot. If we're using one of these other aspect ratios, we're going to have to crop the video to some degree. And so I'm not going to get into that too much, although I'll show you some tricks that will apply to that. But you'll be able to pick up on that pretty quickly, pretty easily, if you're going to post a square video or a 9 by 16 video. But for today's instruction, let's just go ahead and follow the 16 by 9 ratio. The other thing that you're going to notice here is that we have 2 sets of guides going along each edge of our video frame. So the outside guide that we have here that makes a rectangle in our frame, that outside area is what we call essential area. So any information that is going to be essential for our viewers to see should fall inside this outer guide right here. The inner guide is what we call title safe. So if you remember, I've been encouraging you to bring your titles or your text on your images inside, away from the edge just a little bit. When we're dealing with video, it's actually going to provide those guides for us. And we could go in here and move these, but really they're placed where we want them to be. So let's just go ahead and leave those. If we need to provide another guide, we can bring in those guides with our rulers, just as we would with a photograph. Okay, so this inside guide, once again, is title safe. All of your text should go inside that inner guide. So we need to remember that as we create lower third identifier and other graphics that have text in them. So at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down to the bottom here. You see this option. It says Create Video Timeline. I'm going to go ahead and click on that, and it'll change our interface just a little bit. We see that we've got a video timeline going on here. Now, if you're not seeing very much of this, you'll be able to get this double arrow like you see right here on the bottom. Okay, get that double arrow, click on it, and you can pull it up or pull it down. Your interface may look a little bit more like this, and you want to create a little bit more space that you can see in your timeline. So get that double arrow, and you can just slide that right up. And now you can see more space in your timeline. And that's going to be important because we're going to start stacking layers here. The layers will show up over in our layers panel, but more importantly, they're going to show up on our timeline, and we're going to be able to manipulate them. So to get started, I've given you 2 folders of video clips that you can work with. The first one is the Hungry Heartland video, and you'll notice inside there's about 11 clips that are called Sherry, Sherry 01, Sherry 02, 03, and so on and so forth. All of these clips are sound bites of a woman named Sherry. Okay, the Prairie Fire video does not have any sound bites, so I have not renamed those files. But in Hungry Heartland, we do have some video clips that are sound bites. So I'm going to use this first one, Sherry 01. I've edited these down to be short and sweet for you. We go ahead and drop that in there. You'll see that this is a little bit smaller than the background area. And that is because I have compressed these files, these video files, to be standard definition, which means they're a little bit smaller pixel-wise than our lowest high definition video. And that's what we chose here as a template as we began this project. We chose a 720p. These video clips are actually 480p. So we can do one of 2 things. Either we can go ahead and stretch this video out by hitting our transform tool, Command T or Control T, and we can stretch this out to fit. You'll notice it is exactly the same aspect ratio as the 720. Go ahead and hit return. Take that. The other option that we have for ourselves is under image size. We could go ahead and reduce the size of our image. We want to make sure that we click this link right here between our width and our height. And you will notice if I change my width now to 16, it is now 16 by 9. But I can change that also. I can reduce that to, let's say, 10 by a little over 5.5 and hit OK. That's another way that we can do that. Now, actually, that was probably a preferred way to do that in this case when we're dealing with low resolution video. Because if we have to stretch low resolution video to increase its size to fill our canvas, then it's the same thing as our low resolution photographs. We're actually increasing the size of the pixels. And so what happens then is it starts to blur or pixelize, and it doesn't look quite as clean. So I've actually gone ahead and changed this to a lower size a lower resolution, which is preferred. If we want to view it a little bit larger, just like with our images, Command 0, that will fill up the screen. Okay, so now we'll see in our layers panel, we have layer 0, which is our background, and we could theoretically just delete that layer if we'd like to. And then we see our layer of Sherry 01 right here. And in our timeline, you'll notice the two clips as well. Okay, so we have layer 0 and we have Sherry 01. These are in different video groups. And you'll notice this blue little, it's not quite a triangle, but an arrow. That is what we call our playhead. So our playhead shows us where in the video is that we're actually viewing. So to start that, I can either come over here, here's my player controls. You remember a DVD player or on your mobile device, you'll see these controls: play, fast forward, rewind, all of that. And I can go ahead and hit play on that.
I was working at Dollar General at the time, and I kind of had it in the back of my mind and didn't know if it was really something I wanted to do.
So there is our video clip with the sound bite.
And
We'll
I
keep
talked
it
to several
playing.
people, and she said, I'm closing it if nobody's interested in buying it. And I gave it a lot of thought and knew I didn't have the money to do it, but I went through the revolving loan through our county and was able to get the money to do that and all the paperwork and got the money to do that, and realized that if you close this store, it would close this town.
Okay, so there is our overall video clip. You can hear what Sherry has to say here. You can see that there is a layer below there. That is our layer 0. And actually, at this point, let's go ahead and delete that. We don't really need it. What we may want to do here, we have several different video clips available to us in our folder. What we might want to do is might want to add what we call B-roll, or secondary video that goes along with what our subject is saying. So in this case, Sherry is talking about her grocery store, which is called the Cuba Cash Store. And she is talking about how it meets the needs of a community, but the community is very small and it's probably right on the edge of closing. So what we may want to do is add some clips in here. We have some space in front of her. It's been framed very nicely by the videographer. And I'm going to try something. I'm going to first of all find my clips. And there is a clip out here. There it is. It's the exterior. I'm going to bring that clip right in here and make sure that you see that green plus sign right there. Okay, I'm going to drop that in. Now you'll see on our layers panel that it has appeared over top of our first layer. You'll see the same thing on your timeline, but you'll notice also that the exterior is not as long as the first clip. At this point, you'll also notice our little squares around here and our blue X right through the middle of the image. That tells me that its transform tool is on, and I'm going to need to hit return in order for that to activate. And just like in Photoshop, when we're dealing with stills, any layer that is over top the previous layer will cover things up unless it is smaller or has transparency. So in this case, also the same thing applies in case it's shorter. So there we come to the end of our upper clip that is called exterior, and Sherry, her clip continues to go on. So she shows up. What I want to do is I want to actually take this video and have it show up during Sherry's talking. But also notice in here, there's a little bobble. See that little bobble in that video? So we're going to edit out the bobble. We don't want the bobble in there. We can either select the clip before the bobble or the clip after the bobble. And I think before the bobble is a little bit longer than after the bobble. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to grab the tail end of my video clip, and notice my cursor view kind of changes a little bit. And this looks like a pitchfork or something. I'm just going to click and hold on that. And I'm going to drag this over where my playhead is. I'm using my playhead as a place marker for where I want that video to end. So at this point, I also need to realize that I can make adjustments to my video clips just like I made those adjustments to any other layer in my Photoshop projects. So I'm looking at this image right here and I think, you know, some of that stuff could really pop out a little bit more. So I can go under Image, Adjustments, and I can start here with my levels. Just like I do, remember Option, hold it down, turns it white. We'll bring that all the way up till we start seeing just a little bit of color. We'll do the same thing on the other end. Turns it black there. We'll bring it inside until we start seeing a little bit of color coming in. Hit OK. That helps a little bit. Some of those colors, especially on the flag, we see those are popping just a little bit more. We can do some other adjustments. We can try our brightness, try our contrast. Other adjustments that we might want to make here as well. Shadows and highlights help things pop a little bit more. Okay, so we can make any of those adjustments that we would normally make for a still image layer. Now the next thing that I'd like to do with this is I want to put this video clip inside of a circle. So what I'm going to do now is on my layer, I'm going to choose my elliptical marquee tool, and I am going to create a circle. Fairly good sized. There we go. And now I'm going to add a mask. Go ahead and click mask. And look what's happened here. Now my image, my upper layer has gone inside that circle. Now I can see Sherry speaking, and I can see the information in the other layer of video. But what's happened here is it's cut off so much of that image, I can hardly see what's going on. So I'm going to unlock or unlink the mask from the video. I'm going to make sure I select the video option here, and I'm going to choose my transform tool, Command T. Okay, it's going to make some changes there. That's okay. And I'm going to keep the same size. So I'm going to zoom out just a little bit here so I can see all of my edges. I'm going to keep the same aspect ratio. And I'm going to shrink that size down just a little bit. Looks like I went a little too far because the circle is actually starting to disappear. And then we'll change the position just a little bit so we can read Cubicache. Okay, we're not going to be able to read the whole thing there, Cubicache store, but we'll go ahead and read Cubicache right there. And now I've got my video, secondary video, on a layer in a circle over top Sherry as she's speaking. Notice I have placed that inside my essential area, right up to the edge, so I might want to change my mind on that, but it is inside that essential area, so it should be seen clearly. Now what I'd like to do is I'd like to add another video clip. to this. Now there's a line here that Sherry says right at the end of her soundbite that I want to see her full screen without any other distractions.
And was able to get the money to do that and all the paperwork and got the money to do that. And
right here, listen to this.
And realized that if you close this store, it would close this town.
Okay, so that's the line that I want to really emphasize.
And
so right there, I'm going to place my playhead right here. When I add a new video clip, I don't want it any longer than that one right there. Okay. So let's go in and find another video clip. And in this case, what I'm going to choose is a clip of one of her neighboring businesses. It's called Betty's Cafe. I'm going to bring that over. Again, make sure I get my green plus. And notice it has put it up on another video layer or video group. And that's what they call these over here, is video group. I'll go ahead and hit return on that. But now I'm going to move this clip so that it's on the same layer as my exterior. Okay. And I want to put this inside that same circle. So what I'm going to do to make it easy on myself, first of all, I'm going to collapse all of this with all of these adjustments that I've made. Now what I'm going to do, make sure that these two are linked. I'm going to copy this layer. Now I'm going to unlink on the copied layer. I'm going to unlink the video clip from the mask. I'm going to select the mask. I'm going to pull that mask up onto Betty's Cafe. And then I'm going to delete this extra layer of video. And why would I do that? Why didn't I just copy the mask? Well, simply because it won't allow us to copy the mask. So I copied the entire layer, used the mask, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust the size and placement of that clip. And I want to be able to read the words Betty's Cafe. And that's going to be really tough because that's actually up at the edge of that video clip. So we'll do that. So let's go ahead and watch what we have here. What we should see, we'll see Sherry speaking here. We'll see a clip of the Cuba Cash store in the circle, and then that will change to the exterior of Betty's Cafe.
I was working at Dollar General at the time, and I kind of had it in the back of my mind and didn't know if it was really something I wanted to do. And I talked to several people, and she said, I'm closing it if nobody's interested in buying it. And I gave it a lot of thought and knew I didn't have the money to do it, but I went through the revolving loan through our...
Okay. Now, that's all good, but that change is kind of abrupt. I might want to add a transition in here. A transition is how we change from one clip to the other. Right now, the transition is what we call a cut, which is an instantaneous change. I'm going to do what's called a dissolve, which will blend the two images together temporarily as they transition from one to the next. So this little box right here, where it's black and white on opposite sides, has our transition option. I'll select that, and you'll see right there, the second one down is a crossfade. I'm simply going to click and hold on that, grab it, and pull it down to that space right in between the two video clips. Okay, and we can go back and we can watch that.
And I talked to several people, and she said, I'm closing it if nobody's interested in buying it.
Okay, you see how it dissolved right there inside that circle. So that's some things that we can do. Now, I've got a lot of space down here. We can see some bananas and parts of those t-shirts. What I might want to do is I might want to bring in another clip. In this case, I'm going to bring in this clip here called Kid and Cart. This is a clip of a young boy pushing a cart. Okay. Again, let's make sure we get our plus sign in there. There we go. We've got Kid and Cart. We've got our transform tool turned on. Let's go ahead and hit return. And notice we don't see it right now. And that's curious. If we come down to our timeline, you'll notice that our playhead is right at the beginning of that clip. So if we move our playhead into the clip, there we can see him pushing his cart. Okay. Let's find a different location for that. So let's go ahead and first of all, move this clip to the beginning of our timeline. Okay. There we go. And then we'll turn on our transform tool again, Command T. And I'm going to shrink it down so it's in the lower right-hand corner of my video. Just a little bit smaller. And let's move it off of that essential area frame, or hit those guides right there. Okay, and we can leave it right there for the time being.
I was working at Dollar General at the time, and I kind of had it in the back of my mind and didn't know if it was really something I wanted to do. And I talked to several people, and she said, I'm closing it if nobody's interested in buying it.
Okay, you noticed there that as we got to the end of the video clip, it just disappeared. And that's fine if that's what we want. But maybe what we want to do is we want to add in another video clip next to that that goes with it. So let's go ahead and find another video clip. There's one here called Buying Milk. And let's go ahead and add that. Once again, it's created its own new video group. Now, I don't want it there on its own group. Eventually, I'm going to bring it down to the same layer as that layer of the young man pushing his cart. But for now, what I want to do is I want to bring this over top of the young man's pushing the video cart, because I want to resize it to the same size. So Command T for my transform tool, and I will move it. Now, see, we don't see the boy pushing the cart because our playhead is in the wrong place. So I'm going to undo that. I'm going to move my, I'm going to hit enter here first. Move my playhead so it's right in line with the stack here. Now I can transform. As I do so, I'll be able to see that video clip underneath and make my second clip exactly the same size. I can make some fine-tuning adjustments. I can even zoom in here just as normal. And I want to make sure that I get that clip exactly the same size as the one underneath it. Now let's go ahead and move this clip down to the second, or the same layer. Now as we watch it, we're zoomed in here. Notice pixelizing, part of that is because we're dealing with moving video and the computer's not keeping up, or the software is not keeping up. While we're zoomed in here, let's go ahead and watch this.
Talked to several people, and she said, I'm closing it if nobody's interested in buying it. And
okay. Got a nice transition there between those two clips, and we can go ahead and pop back out. So now we have 3 different clips going on all at the same time. Down at the bottom, we have Sherry speaking to us about her store. We have another layer that is inside of this circled mask, and we have another layer that is just a full rectangular video. And it all combines to tell this story about the Cuba Cash store in about 30 seconds. Now we need to go ahead and shorten this last clip just a little bit so that it's no longer than what Sherry is speaking. Actually, we want it to be no longer than our second layer of video. So again, we'll get our pitchfork looking arrows and we'll trim that right in using our playhead as a place marker. Now it looks like we trimmed it just a little too much. Let's bring that back out. Okay, now both of those extra clips end at the same time. Now something else that we can do is, let's say, for instance, this clip here where we have the boy pushing the cart, maybe we want that to slide in to our frame a little bit after Sherry starts speaking. What we can do now is over here on our video group 1, we can click our arrow and open up our menu. And you'll see here that we have several different menu options of things that we can work with. We're going to work with this first one called Transform. And we're going to start adding keyframes. If you've worked with video in other programs before, you might already be familiar with keyframes. Keyframes mark a position where something begins or ends, some type of action usually, or it could be a filter being applied, whatnot. So I want to make sure that I've got my clip selected here that I'm going to work with. I see transform, and I want to transform this clip. To open the options, I'm going to click this little icon that looks like a stopwatch. Click on that, and it's already marked our first keyframe. And that's great. We'll go ahead and use that. But now we need another keyframe at the beginning of the clip. So we'll put our playhead to the beginning of our clip. We'll come over here, and in this diamond, we'll click that diamond. So that has marked our beginning point. And the other keyframe is marked our ending point. We can jump between those keyframes very easily by simply clicking this arrow. Notice the arrow on the right is white, and the arrow on the left is gray. Okay? The gray means there is no more keyframes in that direction. The white means there is at least one other keyframe in that direction. So we can just click that arrow, and it jumps right to our new keyframe. In this case, what we want to do is the video clip here, the kid pushing the cart, is in the final position where we want it to be. So our second keyframe is exactly what we want. The first keyframe is what we want to adjust. So we'll jump back there by clicking that arrow again. Let's go to our clip, and let's right-click on to get this new menu. The new menu is called Motion, and we can click on here and see all of the different options for our motion. Okay, what we can do, if we want this video, say, to slide in, let's go ahead and hit our transform, and we'll slide it right out of position here, out of frame, where we can't see it. Hit OK. Let's jump to our next keyframe, and there it is. So what that tells us is that keyframe 1, something begins, and in this case, the something is sliding that video clip into the frame. And then at the second keyframe is where that something ends. So in between there, we'll get that motion. So you can see that as we drag our playhead. Let's go ahead and watch it in real time.
I was working at Dollar General at the time, and I kind of had it in the back.
Okay, and there you go. We have that clip that slides right in. So we've added a transition between two video clips that are in the circle. We've added a transition or a transformation of position with a clip. And we've got multiple clips inside of our frame. So we've got a lot going on here.
I was working at Dollar General at the time, and I kind of had it in the back of my mind and didn't know if it was really something I wanted to do. And I talked to several people, and she said, I'm closing it if nobody's interested in buying it. And I gave it a
Now, remember how I mentioned that we can use all of our same image adjustments on each of these. We can also use filters. So we can come up and filter any of these layers or any of these clips. Let's go ahead and close or collapse our video group 2. Let's come down to Sherry. We'll make sure we've selected her in our layers panel as well. And we'll use a look that's it's kind of found its way out of vogue anymore, but just a few years ago, it was a pretty popular effect. We'll use that just because it shows a very dramatic look. Let's go to our filter gallery, and we're going to choose our cutout option. And you'll notice as we go in here, there's our cutout, and it's made Sherry look like she's an animated cartoon to some degree. We can adjust how she looks there, our number of levels. The more levels we have, the more real it looks. Edge simplicity, the higher the numbers there, the more large or broad those shapes look. So we're going to bring our simplicity down low, and our edge fidelity also, if it's higher, will look crisper. So there's a very simple look that we have there. We'll click OK. And there you can see how Sherry now looks a little bit like a cartoon character.
I was working at Dollar General at the time, and I kind of had it in the back of my mind and didn't know if it was really something I wanted to do. And
okay, now that may or may not be the look that you're going for, but we can go in and change filters. We can do all sorts of things. We can use all of these different filters. We can go into our filter gallery. All of the things that we would normally do in a layer. We can do the same thing with each of these other layers as well. But in the interest of time, let's go ahead and just show you how to finish this up now. The next thing that you need to do for videos, we have to do what's called rendering. When we're working with video, it's a little bit like baking a cake. When you bake a cake, you take all of these different ingredients and you put them in a bowl and you stir them up, and everything's all mixed together. And sometimes, especially if it's chocolate cake, you might want to dip your finger in there and test it out a little bit, see how it tastes. But even though you have all of the ingredients in place, it's not a cake yet until you put it in the oven and you actually bake it. And that's kind of the same concept with video. And this is true whether you're doing video in Photoshop, if you're working in Premiere, Final Cut Pro, any other video editing program. You have to render your video. So we are now going to render our video, and the way we will do that is we'll come down here to the far left-hand corner. Down at the bottom, you see this arrow. Let's select that arrow, and now what we have the opportunity to do is rename this. And I'll just call this Sherry. And I can tell it where I want to send the video. So I'm going to select a folder. In my case, I'm going to go to the desktop, and I have a folder for this class and this lesson. I'll just go right there and choose. I have the document size. I have the format. Now this format is important, H.264. What that means is it will export this out as an MP4 file. If you prefer an MOV file, you can choose QuickTime. You can also choose DPX, and I'm not real familiar with that. I don't know what it does. It has not been helpful to me in the past. So H.264 if you want MP4, QuickTime if you want MOV. Those are the two file formats that you might want. High quality or any of these other qualities based on where you might be sending your video for its final destination. Okay, document size 720 by 405. It's a little bit smaller than what we might expect because of the lower quality. That's okay. And the frame rate for standard video, 29.97 frames per second is typically what we want. You want more of a film look, you might go down to 23.976, or if you're working in Europe, 25 frames per second is standard. But for our use, we'll just stay with 29.97 and tells us how many frames we have. We have 807 frames. We want all of them, and all the rest of these settings are good. So let's go ahead and render that. And this will take a little bit of time. Remember at the beginning how I told you how video files are quite large, and that's why this process is going to take quite a bit of time. I have condensed it in this video for you so you don't have to watch the whole blue status bar go across. So be patient as you are going through this process. At this point, my rendering has finished. I'm going to go ahead and minimize Photoshop and go back to my folder with all of my images, and there you can see sherry.mp4. I'm going to double click it. It's going to open up for me in a small window, and I
I
can
was
go ahead
working
and
at
play
Dollar
it.
General at the time, and I kind of had it in the back of my mind and didn't know if it was really something I wanted to do. And I talked to several people, and she said, I'm closing it if nobody's interested in buying it. And I gave it a lot of thought and knew I didn't have the money to do it, but I went through the revolving loan through our county and was able to get the money to do that and all the paperwork and got the money to do that, and realized that if you close this store, it would close this town.
So there is our video clip just as we saw it in Photoshop. We've exported it out, and now we can put this video anywhere we like. We can post it on YouTube or Vimeo. We can post it on Facebook or on Instagram, whatever we'd like. Remember, if you're going to do an Instagram or a Twitter video, use one of these other aspect ratios. They're going to be more common for your audience. That means you need to know your audience well before you ever start with your video clip. So figure out which aspect ratio is going to be best for you, and go ahead and play around with some filters and other adjustments for your exercise today. And that is your call to action. Okay, your assignment for this exercise is to use any of these video clips that I have provided for you in either the Hungry Heartland video clips or the Prairie Fire video clips that we have supplied you in Canvas. You don't need to use all of the clips. You're going to notice there's quite a few video clips there, and all I want you to do is use a handful of them. I want you to edit a short piece together that might promote either a prairie fire, prairie burning, or might promote this documentary that my students produced called Hungry Heartland, and the concept of what's called a food desert, or places where food is very scarce. So I want you to edit together a 15 to 30-second video clip that will promote that. You can go in and add some text to your videos as well. Use some filters, use some adjustment layers, use all the things that we have learned already to use in Photoshop, and apply those to your video timeline and see what you can come up with. Have fun with this. This is stretching you a little bit further, but I know you can handle it. I'll look forward to seeing your videos, and I'll look forward to seeing you one more time as we finish up our class for the term. Good to be with you. This is Doc Hallaq in the video workshop. Come back tomorrow.